Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and it is official, guys. Breaking news, recording this 2 minutes after it happened. James Gladstone, the director of scouting for the Los Angeles Rams, has taken the job with the Jacksonville Jaguars to be the next general manager. If you can't tell, I am super excited about this. For me, going into this process, like most fans, we didn't really know a ton of the candidates, right? We knew the Ian Cunninghams and the Ray Agnews, which he actually didn't even get interviewed for this job, if I recall correctly. But we hear about a lot of names, right? Two names that really stood out to me in this process. One I've talked about before was Brandon Brown, just a guy I really liked off of Hard Knocks, thought he's super professional and was ready for this kind of role. The other one that much of the fan base fell in love with was James Gladstone, who has had a phenomenal recent history with the Rams, having some of the best draft classes in the NFL. You talk about this last year, drafting the defensive rookie of the year in Jared Verse. You talk about going back to the year before, finding Puka Nacua in the later rounds of the class, right? This is a phenomenal candidate for GM that the Jaguars have landed. And it seemed like a lot of things kind of flipped on their head at the last second. We were told constantly this was Ian Cunningham's job to lose, right? The whole way through. We were told, if you follow Yardline Yoda, he posted something before we even started interviewing GMs that Ian Cunningham was the next guy. And I kind of call BS on that, right? Because you haven't even started the process yet. You're kind of jumping the gun on that. And I think there is, of course, substance because it was very clear the Jaguars preferred Cunningham through much of this process. But it is Gladstone who's getting this job. And to kind of note some of the things that have apparently happened in the last few days, you're going to take a look back at this message we saw yesterday. So take this as you want, of course, right? Because like I just said, he did predict Ian Cunningham was going to land this job. I think it was a very preemptive thing. And so you take it how you can, right? I think there is some truth to this. But they were saying, and this was even commented on by Les Snead's wife in the comments, kind of confirming some of this. But Gladstone was picking up a lot of ground on Ian Cunningham this week. And not only that, but Sean McVay and Les Snead themselves were reaching out to the Jaguars about him as a candidate and how much of a great fit he would be in Jacksonville. Now, I also saw Snead actually work for the Jaguars way back in the day, so that was cool to see. But he talked about how he was so impactful on the last two drafts, right? And things really just started to flip. You had Gladstone come in, really nail the interview with the team, and Ian Cunningham, meanwhile, dragging his feet throughout the process, not sure if he wanted the job, playing hardball the whole way through. And it goes from it's his job as soon as he accepts it to the guy waits too long, and by the time he wants it, it's not his anymore, right? There's a better candidate out there. That's personally how I felt. It's how the Jaguars feel now with their final decision. So really crazy process. But guys, the best part of this is that the end result, I think, is phenomenal for the Jaguars, what they've done. It took a long time, obviously. It's the 21st of February that we're talking about this. But you've got a GM with a scouting background from what's been the best drafting organization the last couple of years, arguably. You've got a head coach coming from the Bucs that worked under Sean McVay. It's a Sean McVay disciple. So you have this relationship between these two guys already from that. But you've got someone who's going to be able to help out the run game, who understands the priorities that the team needs to have, and has been a really great, young, innovative coach. You brought in a lot of younger people who are well regarded around the NFL for your coordinator positions, your position coaches. It's phenomenal what the Jaguars have done and the way they've pivoted ever since firing Trent Baalke, what was almost a month ago from the date. Would have been the 22nd. It's the 21st. So it didn't even take us a month. And as Jaguars fans, we're in a completely different situation than what we were, right? We're in like the depths of hell back then. And now it's like It's just incredible, right? This is how I personally feel. Maybe it's jumping the gun somewhat, but what I want to make clear is I think, regardless of how this goes, I think the Jaguars ultimately did the best they could after making mistakes and keeping Trent Baalke. The way they pivoted worked out very well. I think they got a great candidate here, and I think they did that as well at the head coach position, the offensive coordinator position, and the defensive coordinator position. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about James Gladstone here again, going over to his bio with the Los Angeles Rams. He's been there 8 seasons. This is his 4th as a director of scouting strategy. They credit him a lot with really changing the process for the Rams and the way they've done this, and you see that in the last 2 years with the success that they've had. So this is someone who has ultimately been a huge part of things changing in Los Angeles and their process over the last couple of years, but that's primarily his background. He's been with the Rams for a long time, would have been there when Liam Cohen was as well, so they're probably somewhat familiar with each other, although, of course, assistant wide receiver coach and the offensive coordinator aren't always talking to the director of scouting. I'm sure they are somewhat, but it's not like they're talking literally every moment of every day, but they are familiar. Now, taking a look at some of these draft classes, right? And we're going to focus primarily on the last 2 where you've had earlier picks, right? You actually had a pick before the 3rd round. Although you could note Kyren Williams down here in the 5th round in 2022. But you have some really good picks here, right? You talk about Kobe Turner. He's a really good player from that class. I think Steve Avila, I have not followed his career closely, but that was a player I liked in that class. Puka Nacua, right? The obvious name to throw out here. A guy who was ultimately, an afterthought in the class, comes in, puts up like 1,500 yards his first year. Just an incredible player for the Rams. Got him at pick 177. Right? So this is a guy who was able to scout talent deep in the class, right? So that's phenomenal to see. You also look at this year, right? The picks they made. You get Jared Verse, who I think is a top 10 I think is a top 10 player from that class. Best edge rusher from the class. Someone who was as pro ready as could be, didn't overthink the pick, took the talent available. Braden Fisk, someone who I think a lot of Jaguars fans probably like, if you're a Florida State fan especially. I don't agree maybe with the draft capital they trade for him, and maybe that's something that will change here as we might be more aggressive. We might end up trading future picks, right? This is an organization that's done that in Los Angeles. But Braden Fisk, pairing him with Jared Verse, was a phenomenal decision at the end of the day, taking out the cost of what it ultimately took to do that. Blake Corum. As much as Blake Corum hasn't really done anything yet in the NFL, this is still someone who had a phenomenal college career. I think he could be really good in the NFL, and it's a matter of, you're playing behind Kyren Williams. So that is why he's not out there all the time for them. But still, I think that's a good draft pick for the 3rd round. And then Cameron Kitchens, you could also throw out, right? He was a player who fell in the class. He was one of the top safeties early on, even regarded as a 1st-round prospect early in the cycle. You pick him up. Joshua Carty, I think, is a fine kicker. And then Bo Limmer, who I believe has started for the Los Angeles Rams. I'll actually confirm that really quick, just to make sure I get that right, because that's the one I'm not 100% confident on, which I do joke about Bo Limmer a little bit because of some of the Senior Bowl reps against T'Vondre Sweat. But yeah, this is a guy who started, right? So you're getting reps out of someone you picked in the 6th round. Now, is it perfect? No, but he's been able to start. He's had some good games, had some bad games as well. But for the 6th round, that's pretty dang good. But ultimately, even if these aren't all hits, right? And I can't comment on every single player here. To get players in the last 2 years that include Kobe Turner, Puka Nacua, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, right? Those types of players. That's the kind of stuff Jacksonville needs. We need to get more value out of the picks than is usually expected. We got to start hitting. And we've had some hits, right? But Brian Thomas Jr. is not a normal pick around Jacksonville, right? But you go look at what the Rams have done, and they're consistently each year hitting on someone, right? Kyron Williams, big hit for the team. Puka Nacua, big hit for the team. Jared Verse, big hit for the team. One each year at least. So, phenomenal stuff, right? And I think one thing you also saw from James Gladstone, if you watched any videos or followed the Rams off-season show, I don't know what it's called exactly, but they went through the draft process behind the scenes. And James Gladstone, he's a part of a staff that very much takes into consideration other people's opinions, right? Not necessarily outside the organization as much, but scouts, right? People in the building. What do you guys think? And they consider that and believe it. It's not just one guy in Trent Baalke who's like, I want the big guy who's got long arms, and I don't know if he's good at football, but give me him, right? And that doesn't work out all the time. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I think that's a huge change. And what Liam Cohen's going to bring, what James Gladstone's going to bring, what a lot of these people bring. Collaborative process. They're going to do the best they can with that. And they're smart, young, innovative guys, right? James Gladstone, it's like 35 years old. So that's the exciting part, right? And that's where, even if this doesn't work out in a couple years, I don't think that's going to be the case, of course. But if it didn't, I could still understand why they did this and get behind the notion. We talked about this before we even got to the offseason, right? Take a chance on something new. Take a chance on something that could work for a really long time. If you hit on Liam Cohen and James Gladstone, who will be here until they're fired, right? Or they retire, whichever one comes first. That is like 20 to 30 years of having continuity in the organization. So if you hit on this hire, that's what you've signed up for. So that's why I'm excited, because I think they took a shot on the right people. I think if it works out, there is a ton of potential long-term for this team. I think they have people who are going to come in, be willing to admit the faults in this team, be able to make changes, and make it all for the better. So get excited. You know, I know not everyone's going to agree on who we hire or what players we sign in a few weeks when free agency comes up, but I do think that you can look at this and say, hey, there's a real shot that this is going to work out really well for the Jaguars. And honestly, at the same time, you went from Trent Baalke to James Gladstone. Okay, let's be pretty happy about that, because that alone is a huge upgrade. So that is all I got for this video, but we've been kind of waiting for this news. Thankfully, it came out super quick, but I am excited. I'm going to go celebrate. We're going to wrap it up, though, by thanking channel members, Premier Seer 904, Nightmare Eco, Gator John Bites, Scrubber Ducky 500, Frangies, and Brian Foster. I appreciate all your support. Let me know your thoughts in the description. What kind of stuff you want to see coming up soon. We're obviously going to be focusing really heavy on the combine here the next week, but there's a lot going on in Jacksonville, so we got a lot of other things we could discuss too. So thanks for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.